Hello all, welcome back. In this video, we'll be discussing about Hadoop Overview. Before we start with Hadoop, first let's see the traditional approach of database management system. In this approach, we can see that an enterprise will have a computer which will process and store the big data. For storage, the programmer or user will take the help of some database vendors like Oracle, IBM, etc. In this approach, the user interacts with the applications, which in turn handles the part of data storage and the analysis. And as we have seen here, that the user is dealing with some kind of structured data, and the database will be some kind of relational database, and it has some centralized system. However, like this approach works fine with these applications or the applications that has less volumes of data. Like we can see here the structured data, which are some table, and this doesn't come with big size, or it is if like the volume is less, uh, and this kind of data can be stored or accommodated by a standard server or up to the limit of processor that it is processing of the that data. Like it can be processed or by that server. However, with the rise of big data, we can see here, like we with the evolution of technology, we can now the data are being generated with the high enormous amount of size, and with the very fast volume, very fast velocity, and with the varieties of data. We can see here the data are being generated in the form of structured data or some kind of semi-structured data or unstructured data. When it comes to deal with this kind of data like structured, semi-structured and unstructured data, it is hectic task to process this kind of data. So uh, with the like when here we can see like it will have some kind of single database, or the traditional approach cannot handle this kind of data, or some kind of database bottleneck is created. And like the in this case what we can see is like the centralized system cannot be able to process this kind of big data. So to solve this problem, the Google came with the solution, and using the algorithm known as MapReduce. And here one can process and store the big data using the MapReduce. You can find this MapReduce paper, this here this Dan Jeffrey and Sanjay Gemawat. It was published in 2004. You can find this paper, MapReduce simplified data processing on large clusters. This is the solution to given by the Google. And here what it does is like this algorithm divides the tasks into the small parts and assign them to the many computers, and collects the result from them when um, integrated from the result of dataset. And what it does is like it will this task is divided into the small parts and assign them to many computers and collects the result from them, and then it integrates those from the result of the dataset. And for processing of small parts, commodity hardware can be used, like here the processing is done with this commodity hardware. And this is the MapReduce algorithm, which is uh, proposed by the which is developed by the Google. And based on this map solution provided by the Google, this uh, the author or the uh, Don Doug Cotting and his team developed the open source project called the Hadoop, and it runs the application using the MapReduce algorithm, where the data is processed in parallel with the others, and it is used to develop the application that can perform the complete statistical analysis on the huge amounts of data. So, in this way, the Hadoop has been developed, and it is an Apache open source framework which is written in Java, and it allows the distributed processing of large dataset across the clusters of computer using the simple programming models. And the Hadoop framework application works in the environment that provides distributed storage and computation across the clusters of the computer. It is designed to scale up from a single server to the thousands of machines, and it's offering local computation and the storage. And this Hadoop technology provides parallel processing through the different commodity hardware simultaneously, as we have seen this commodity hardware in the previous slide as well, like in the MapReduce. And this commodity hardware is nothing but it uh, is low end and very cheap hardware. So as it uses the cheap hardware at the low end, uh, so the Hadoop technology is economic, or this Hadoop solution is also economic. And instead of having a big or very expensive server or very expensive single computational module, this technology divides the it performs the processing and storage in a commodity hardware, like in commodity hardware, even it performs some kind of it provides some kind of fault tolerant schema as well, like we the data are stored in some kind of replications in the form of different replications, so fault tolerant can also be achieved with the help of Hadoop technology that we'll discuss in more detail in our subsequent slides. um, the main thing is like it provides us the very cost effective solution for the storage and processing of the big data. And uh, here we'll be discussing about the Hadoop ecosystem. Hadoop has multiple components and software libraries, and uh, we can see here different multiple um, components or modules of the Hadoop in this figure, and we can see the different components like Hadoop distributed file system, which is known as HDFS, MapReduce, Yarn, Peak, Hype, Mahot, Uzi, HBase, Zookeeper, Plume, and Scope. And we'll see them one by one. And first, let us see the SDFS, or the Hadoop Distributed File System. It is the most important component, and it is used for primarily uh, for the storage system for the Hadoop ecosystem. And whatever data we are going to store, the data will be stored in the SDFS. Uh, and another component or another module is the MapReduce. It is the it is another core component of the Hadoop ecosystem, and it is used to process different data in the SDFS storage. And we can write the different types of applications that can manage the vast amount of data stored in the SDFS, and where the data will be splitted into multiple partitions, and they will get processed in the parallel. And next is the yarn. It stands for yet another resource negotiator. It is the another component in Hadoop ecosystem. It provides resource management as it controls the workloads, and it's more responsible for the management and monitoring of the workloads. So it is known as the operating system of Hadoop, as it is doing some kind of workload handling. So um, it is known as operating system of the Hadoop. And another component of the Hadoop ecosystem is Hive. It is used for analyzing and querying and data summarization table on the large data sets stored in the Hadoop files. It uses the SQL Hive query language, which is similar to the SQL or structured query language syntax. And we can see another tool, which is Peak, or we can see here the scripting, Peak scripting. This is used for analyzing and querying the large data set that is stored in the SDFS and can be used on the Pixel. And it uses the Peak Latin language to uh, perform its task. And another one we can see here is the SBase data store. This SBase is used for storing large amount of structured data into tables. This is another NoSQL database and works on SDFS. This NoSQL means not only SQL database, and it works on this SBase. SBase provides relative data handling that is that is one of the main important feature of the SBase. And we can see the another component, which is Mahot, as we can see here. This is the ML. We can see ML means machine language. uh, it is designed for the scalable machine learning algorithms on Hadoop. When the data are stored in SDFS, Mahot can provide different data science tools to get more meaningful data from this data set. Like from this tool, we can have different machine language operations applicable to the Hadoop ecosystem. So if we want to perform some more advanced analytics, like for the prediction or for some kind of predictive analytics, and yeah, for predictive analytics we use machine language tools, and the Hadoop provides this through the Mahot ML. Or we can perform some machine language related operations on the data that is stored in SDFS storage using the Mahot. And another tool that is available in the Hadoop ecosystem is Scoop. It is used to import data from external data sources to the SDFS or SBase or Hive. And it can also export data from Hadoop components to the external sources. This is the Scoop. And Apache Flume can collect and move a large amount of data from different sources and store it in the SDFS. Using Apache Flume, one can get data from different servers directly onto the SDFS. And we can see another component, which is Zookeeper. This Zookeeper is mainly used for the coordination, as it is mentioned in the diagram. And Zookeeper is the Hadoop component which is used to maintain all the configuration in information, naming, and etc. And these also provide distributed synchronization and group services. It can manage a large cluster of machines doing the proper communication between them. And another one is the Uji. This Uji it deals with some kind of workflow. And the Hue or Hadoop user experience. Hue, this is graphical user interface, UI based web interface. And using this Hue, we can we can perform queries, and we can also visualize the data using this tool or this component hue. So this is just a basic uh, summarization of the Hadoop ecosystem or the components available in the Hadoop. And now we'll be discussing about the Hadoop architecture. And in Hadoop architecture, at its core, basically it has two major layers, which are the MapReduce, which is for processing and computation layer, and another is the storage layer, or it is done by the storage is done by the Hadoop distributed file system SDFS, and the processing or computation layer is this consists of the MapReduce. We can see here um, the MapReduce and SDFS, and it also consists of yarn framework and the common utilities. But uh, the two most important layers or two most important components are the SDFS and the MapReduce. And we can see here the MapReduce is more like the main task of the MapReduce is for the parallel programming model, or we can write parallel program for writing distributed applications, that is devised by the Google for efficient processing of the uh, uh, processing of large data amounts of the data. It can go up to multi terabytes data sets on the large clusters, or it can go to thousands of nodes of the commodity hardware in a reliable and fault tolerant manner. And the MapReduce program runs on Hadoop, which is an Apache open source framework. Like, as the MapReduce is developed by Google, and it is nothing but parallel programming model, and it is written for distributed application, and uh, it's mainly developed for the efficient processing of the large amounts of data on the large clusters. So this and it can be run by the Hadoop Hadoop framework. And another component is the uh, Hadoop distributed file system, and it is based on the Google file system GFS, and it provides the distributed file system that is designed to run on commodity hardware. And it has many similarities with the existing distributed file system. However, the differences from other distributed file systems are significant. Like, it is highly fault tolerant, and it is designed to be deployed on the low cost hardware, like the commodity hardware, and it provides high throughput access to application data, and is suitable for applications having the large data set. And apart from this, um, um, Hadoop, like apart from the two components like Hadoop SDFS and Hadoop MapReduce, um, the Hadoop framework also includes the another two modules like Hadoop Common and Hadoop Yarn. These Hadoop Common are the Java libraries and utilities required for another Hadoop modules. And Hadoop Yarn, this framework is used for job scheduling and cluster resource management. And let's see how Hadoop works. Like uh, while talking about the single processor, or uh, if we want to have a bigger server with the heavy configuration that can handle the large scale processing, uh, it is quite expensive if we want to build some kind of bigger server. as I have mentioned before as well. Like it's quite expensive to build bigger servers with the heavy configuration that handle large scale processing. But in alternative, we can tie together many commodity hardware with the single CPU and as a functional distributed system. And practically, the clustered machines can read dataset in parallel and provide much higher throughput. And this kind of approach, like when we go through the uh, multiple machines, and we try to work on parallel with these machines or with these uh, computers, it is cheaper than one high-end server. So it's the first motivational factor behind using Hadoop, that it runs across the clustered and low-cost machines. Like the Hadoop runs code across the clusters of computers, and this process includes the following core tasks that Hadoop performs. Like first, data is initially divided into the directories and files are divided into uniform size blocks of the 128 MB or 64 or, and these files are then distributed across the various clusters nodes for the further processing. And SDFS is used, being the top of the file system. It supervises the processing, and the blocks are replicated for handling the hardware failure. Like as the blocks are replicated, it because of this replication, the fault tolerant can be achieved in this Hadoop or SDFS, and checking that the code was executed successfully, performing the sort that takes place between the map and the reduce stages, and sending the sorted data to the sorted computers, and finally the writing the debugging logs for the each job. So in this way, the Hadoop uh, uh, SDFS and MapReduce works together to achieve this distributed file system. Or like for the like in this way, the Hadoop distributed file system can be is able to process the big data in with the cheap, with the low cost hardwares. And uh, okay, now we'll see just basics of the Hadoop distributed file system, and in our next class we will be discussing with the Hadoop uh, SDFS in more detail. Like SDFS comes with the distributed file system called the Hadoop distributed file system, and using the Hadoop SDFS, the main data is stored in the multiple data nodes and also replicated. And when one data node is down, the data can be accessed through any other data node. And as I have said before, like the SDFS is very cost effective, as it is very simple and it uses the very simple commodity hardware to process and store the data blocks. And it also provides high throughput access to the application data, which is suitable for applications having the large data set. And we will be discussing about this SDFS and map in more detail in our subsequent classes.